Thank you very much. Thank you, Angus. A very warm welcome to the launch of the SNP's manifesto for the general election. This manifesto sets out a clear plan to end Tory cuts, protect Scottish jobs and strengthen Scotland's hand. It is a manifesto with fairness, opportunity and democracy at its heart. A manifesto for a country that is welcoming and outward-looking. A manifesto that reflects our belief in the infinite possibilities open to the people of Scotland if we work together in the common good to build the kind of country we know we can be. Our pledge at this election is that SNP MPs will work every day to make Scotland's voice heard and build a better country. We know that decisions taken at Westminster in the years ahead will shape our country. So now, more than ever, it is vital to have strong SNP voices standing up for Scotland. With Labour in disarray, the Tories saw a chance to tighten their grip on the whole of the UK for many, many years to come. But with their true colours being exposed in this campaign, we have a real chance to keep them in check. And let us be clear, Labour isn't strong enough to do that. Voting Labour simply risks letting in Tory MPs. In Scotland, only the SNP can keep the Tories in check. In this election, it is vital that we strengthen Scotland's hand, not Theresa May's. Otherwise, so much of what we cherish and value will be under threat. The dismantling of the post-war welfare state, already underway, will pick up pace. Experts are already predicting the biggest rise in inequality since the 1980s. They say that the incomes of the poorest third of working-age households will fall by 10% over the next 4 years, and that Tory policy will drive 1 million more children across the UK into poverty. Just think about that. 1 million more children. That means that by 2021, there could be more than 5 million children across the UK, a number equivalent to the total population of Scotland, living in poverty in one of the richest countries in the world. That is shameful. That is shameful, and our manifesto puts it at the very heart of this election. Jobs will be lost too, as the Tories threaten to turn their backs not just on the EU, but on the single market as well. That is why, more than ever before, we need strong SNP voices at Westminster to stand up to the Tories and to stand up for Scotland. As a country, we face big challenges, but we have made so much progress. We mustn't let Westminster governments drag us backwards. In this manifesto, we set out how strong SNP MPs will help to build a fairer, more equal Scotland. And that starts with a clear alternative to continued austerity. For the Tories, austerity cuts are not simply a policy response to a particular economic situation. They are political dogma, an ideology. And as well as damaging our public services, they hold back our economy. That's why the current UK government has consistently failed to meet all of its fiscal targets. So in public finances, we are setting out a different approach. Our plan has three key aims. Firstly, to balance the UK budget for day-to-day spending by the end of the Parliament, and after that borrowing only to invest. Secondly, to return the deficit to its pre-crash long-term average. Thirdly, to set debt on a downward path. These responsible fiscal targets will return the UK's finances to a stable and sustainable position. And crucially, they will also free up an additional £118 billion of public investment over the next Parliament to grow the economy, safeguard public services and protect household incomes. A clear alternative to 5 more years of austerity, hope and investment for the future, not another potential destroying cycle of cuts. That's the SNP plan. SNP MPs will also back fair tax. In government at Holyrood, we've frozen the basic rate of income tax to help low and middle earners. That is the right approach at a time when rising inflation is making it harder for many families to make ends meet. But we have also opted not to cut tax for higher rate taxpayers. A tax cut for the top 10% of income earners at a time when public spending is under pressure is the wrong priority. We choose investment in our public services instead. SNP MPs will also support an increase across the UK in the additional rate of income tax for those earning more than £150,000 from 45p to 50p. The difference between the SNP and the Tories is this. The Tories' plans will give tax cuts to the wealthiest while pushing more hard-working people and families into poverty. Our plans are fair to all and will lift people out of poverty, not just because it is the right thing to do, but because we know that greater equality helps our economy too. You know, one of the biggest scandals in recent years, and it is a scandal, has been the rise in the number of people living in poverty despite having a job. 70% of children, 70% of children growing up in poverty live in a household where at least one person is working. Scotland already has the highest proportion of workers paid the living wage, the real living wage of any country in the UK, and that is positive. But we need to do more to tackle low pay, falling real wages and reduce support for those on low incomes. That's why today I am setting out a 3-point plan to tackle poverty and inequality and increase the incomes and the living standards of families across the UK. Firstly, we will support moves over the next Parliament, working with business to increase the minimum wage to the level of the real living wage. That means a living wage by the end of the next Parliament that will be slightly more than £10 per hour. Secondly, here in Scotland, we will take a different approach to public sector pay. The 1% pay cap was designed to protect jobs at a time of spending cuts imposed by Westminster. While the SNP government has taken action to soften its impact on the lowest paid, ensuring, for example, that many nurses in Scotland are paid more than their counterparts elsewhere in the UK, there is no doubt that it has been hard for public sector workers. And at a time of rising inflation, it is increasingly unsustainable. Of course, pay rises must be affordable, but they must also reflect the real-life circumstances people face and enable us to attract and retain staff in our public services. So for next year and in future years, we will not assume a 1% pay cap. Instead, we will set a remit for discussions with trade unions and for our evidence to pay review bodies that is based on a proper consideration of the impact of inflation, with a view to reaching fair outcomes that strike the right balance between affordability and the cost of living. And thirdly, the policies in this manifesto will restore fairness to our social security system. Make no mistake, the Tories have sought to undermine faith in the welfare state itself. They have set out very deliberately to stigmatise those on benefits. Of course, no one should be allowed to abuse the system, but their rhetoric is cover for the hardship they are causing to those who work hard and struggle to get by on low incomes. Children, the elderly, women, the disabled, even the bereaved are bearing the brunt. There are around £9 billion in social security cuts still to come over the next 4 years. Not surprisingly, the Tories want to press ahead with every single penny. What is surprising is that Labour is pledging to reverse less than a quarter of those cuts. So let me be clear today, SNP MPs will stand against all of the further planned cuts to social security. And we will do so because they punish the disabled and those who work hard to make ends meet. We will also support the reversal of the two-child cap on tax credits, and we will campaign tirelessly against the immoral rape clause that goes with it. The rape clause, a policy that shames every Tory candidate who supports it. We will demand reversal of the cut to employment and support allowance that is removing £30 per week in vital support from disabled people. And we will oppose the freeze on working age benefits, a policy that is set to reduce the incomes of the poorest in our society by 6%. And the reason we stand against the Tory assault on social security, on the poor, the disabled and the vulnerable is this. These cuts strike at the very heart of how we see ourselves as a nation and our shared ambition for the future of our nation. They are unfair and they are designed to divide. Of course, a growing gap between rich and poor is not the only divide that Tory policy will create. Their manifesto also seeks to set young against old. The utter chaos that engulfs Theresa May's plans for a so-called dementia tax makes me prouder than ever that the Scottish Parliament introduced free personal and nursing care for our elderly. Those assessed as needing personal and nursing care in Scotland receive £249 a week, just under £13,000 a year towards the cost of their care. That significantly reduces the burden on the personal assets of someone who has to fund their own care. So let me make clear today, the SNP will always protect free personal and nursing care for our elderly. Of course, it is concern for fairness in old age that drives this policy, and SNP MPs will be strong voices for fair pensions. The Tory manifesto is nothing short of an assault on pensioners, from the dementia tax to the removal of the winter fuel allowance and the ending of the triple lock. To every older person in Scotland, I say this: it is very clear that the Tories think they can take the votes of many older people for granted, and their manifesto makes clear what they will do if given the chance. If you don't want them to have a free hand to remove your hard-won protections, make sure you elect strong voices who will stand up for you. The SNP will protect the winter fuel allowance, and with pensioner poverty once again on the rise, we will oppose the removal of the pensions triple lock. We will also be strong voices for the women who have been shortchanged due to the accelerated timetable for increases in the women's state pension age. SNP MPs will continue to give full support to the WASPI campaign in their efforts to secure fairness. It seems clear that the Tories are planning to cut deeper to cover the impact of their planned extreme Brexit. But these cuts are hurting the low-paid and pensioners, and they are damaging our public services. That's why we will stand against them. Over the past 10 years, the SNP has prioritised the health service, and we will continue to do so. Our NHS, like health services across the world, faces real challenges. But patient satisfaction is at record levels. Our hospital A&Es are the best performing anywhere in the UK. Many nurses in Scotland are better paid than anywhere else in the UK, and we have integrated health and social care. We already have a pledge to increase the NHS budget by £2 billion by the end of this Scottish Parliament. But our alternative plan for the public finances would allow a further increase in frontline health spending across the UK. SNP MPs will call on the new UK Government to increase health spending per head of population in England to the current Scottish level, which is 7% higher. That would increase the health budget in England by £11 billion more than inflation by 2022. And it would deliver consequential funding to support additional investment in Scotland's NHS of up to £1 billion over and above our current commitment. The SNP standing up for Scotland's NHS now and always. And for our police and fire services, who have served us so well over this past week, as they always do, SNP MPs will demand that a Tory government returns the £140 million of VAT that it has so unfairly taken. Money that the Tories have so unfairly and shamefully taken away from our emergency services. For Scotland's young people and families, we will continue to extend free childcare. We are investing £750 million in a special fund to raise standards in our schools. And the SNP is committed to always protecting free university education. In this election, we are also campaigning to restore the post-study work visa, so we can continue to attract the best and the brightest from around the world to our country here in Scotland. And we're working to ensure that our universities don't lose out on vital European funding. Policies like expanding free childcare, closing the attainment gap in our schools and free university tuition are designed to help young people achieve their goals and create a fairer society. Making sure we have a strong economy is also vital to the futures of our young people. Jobs in the economy are central to this manifesto. These have been really challenging economic times, particularly given the fall in the oil price. But at the end of last year, Scotland's GDP per head was above its pre-recession level. Productivity has been growing faster than the UK, and unemployment is lower than the UK average. And on the greatest economic issue facing Scotland, reversing population decline and growing the number of people of working age who live here, real progress has been made, progress that is now put at risk by Brexit. In government, we have a £6 billion infrastructure programme, and we're taking 100,000 business premises out of paying business rates altogether. In this election, we will not support further reductions to the headline rate of corporation tax. That is not the right priority at this time. But we will support targeted reductions in national insurance to bring down the costs employers face when taking on new workers. And to help boost productivity, we will support an increase in the investment allowance to encourage businesses to invest more in plant and machinery. Supporting our economy is vital to everything we do. We live in a world where technological and economic transformation is happening at a pace we haven't seen before. We have the potential in Scotland, more than most countries on earth, to take advantage of the opportunity this change presents. Our food and drink industry is a multi-billion-pound success story. We have unrivalled energy resources. Our universities are among the best in the world. We are world leaders in the industries of the future, like life sciences, financial services and financial technology, creative industries, space technology and sustainable tourism. Our natural resources, our long-standing reputation for innovation, our educated workforce and our internationally recognised brand give Scotland a head start. The European single market, already the world's biggest, represents a massive opportunity for these areas of Scottish strength. In the digital economy, the services sector, energy, retail, the green and knowledge economy, the single market is still a work in progress, with huge potential still to be unlocked. That means a huge potential economic prize for Scotland. It means a world of opportunity for our young people. But Brexit, especially an extreme Brexit, puts all of that at risk. And that is why I believe so strongly that at the end of the Brexit process, not now, but when the terms of the deal are known, Scotland must have a choice about our future, a choice between following the UK down the Brexit path or becoming an independent country. just too much at stake for Brexit simply to be imposed on Scotland, no matter how damaging it turns out to be. Our future must be decided by us, not for us. Last year's Holyrood election delivered the democratic mandate for Scotland having such a choice, and the recent vote of the Scottish Parliament underline it. If the SNP wins a majority of Scottish seats in this election, that will further reinforce our mandate. And in these circumstances, any continued Tory attempts to block Scotland having a choice when the time is right and the options are clear would be democratically unsustainable. However, that will be a choice for the end of the Brexit process. I want to be clear today that this election also presents Scotland with a more immediate opportunity. In the months ahead, we must make sure that our interests are not ignored in the Brexit negotiations. A vote for the SNP will make sure that Scotland's voice is heard. A majority of people in Scotland voted to remain in the EU. But even many of those who voted to leave have real concerns about the extreme Brexit being pursued by the Prime Minister. To be taken out not just of the EU but also of the single market puts 80,000 Scottish jobs at risk. It poses a real danger to our farmers and fishermen, our universities, our food and drink businesses, to almost every sector of our economy. That is why the Scottish Government published compromise proposals that would keep Scotland in the single market. These proposals were brushed aside by the Prime Minister. But this election offers people the opportunity to give them democratic legitimacy and make it impossible for the Prime Minister to continue to ignore Scotland's voice. So my message today to all voters in Scotland is this. Whether you voted leave or remain last year, or yes or no in 2014, vote SNP on the 8th of June to give me a mandate to demand a place for Scotland at the Brexit negotiating table so we can work to keep Scotland in the single market. Now, more than ever, it is vital to have strong SNP voices standing up for Scotland at Westminster. A vote for the SNP on June the 8th will strengthen Scotland's hand against Tory cuts. It will strengthen Scotland's hand against an extreme Brexit, and it will strengthen Scotland's right to make our own decisions. The fact is, we cannot afford a Tory government with a free hand to do whatever it likes. We must have strong voices, standing up for our interests and defending the values we hold dear. You know that Tory MPs will be a rubber stamp for whatever Theresa May wants. Just as you know that in Scotland, voting Labour risks letting in Tory MPs. Only the SNP is strong enough to keep the Tories in check, and only SNP MPs will always stand up for Scotland. Whether on Brexit, austerity or the future of our public services, this is a manifesto to make Scotland's voice heard. It is a manifesto for prosperity and opportunity, a manifesto to tackle inequality, a manifesto to protect jobs and build the fair society we know is within our grasp, and a manifesto to ensure that Scotland's future will always be in Scotland's hands. I am proud to present it to the Scottish people today. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. I'm now going to take some questions from the media, so please listen quietly and carefully to the media. Questions are here to do the important job of holding us to account. Can I take, if I can see him, Brian Taylor?
First Minister, thanks very much indeed, Brian Taylor, BBC Scotland. Your entire launch, your entire speech is predicated upon the return of a majority Conservative government. You've called that highly likely. You've discounted Labour's prospects. But in those circumstances, wouldn't power reside in numbers 10 and 11 Downing Street? What evidence is there, even from the last couple of years, that even a vast SNP presence at Westminster, where by simple arithmetic you cannot form the majority, that even that vast SNP presence can constrain the Conservatives?
Well, I think we've seen over these past 2 years that it has been the SNP, not Labour, Angus Robertson, not Jeremy Corbyn, that has been the effective opposition to the Tories. Making Scotland's voice heard week in and week out, raising issues that are important not just to Scotland but the whole of the UK week in, week out at Prime Minister's questions. It was the SNP that was the first to spot and to pick up on the national insurance increases in the budget, and that of course then led to a U-turn. So on a whole range of issues it has been the SNP making sure that Scotland's voice is heard. That has been important, and over a period where we may have another Tory government with a bigger majority, that will be even more important. And of course, in politics, who wins elections matters in terms of who has the authority to stand up and speak for those they represent. And if the SNP win this election a week on Thursday, I take nothing for granted. But if we win this election, then yet again the people of Scotland will have put their trust in the SNP to stand up for Scotland. And that is exactly what we will do. And the final point, which gives me great heart, Brian, on this topic, is I think we've seen over her premiership so far, but we've seen particularly in the last 2 weeks, that in Theresa May we face not so much the Iron Lady as the Queen of the U-turn. So the more U-turns we can force it into, the better.
First Minister James Matthews from Sky News. You talk about addressing an independence referendum at the end of the Brexit process. Is the end of the Brexit process still spring 2019, or in circumstances do you regard it as later than that? And also, you say that for the Tories to block a referendum would be democratically unsustainable. Given that they beg to differ, what would you do?
Well, firstly, I think we should let the people have their say on June the 8th, and that's the great opportunity, of course, that Theresa May has given us in calling this election. We have the opportunity for the people of Scotland to have their say. Now, in terms of the first part of your question, I am very clear that Scotland's choice, and Scotland must have a choice. We cannot have our future imposed on us. We hear Theresa May today herself talk about the damage that Brexit could do if it goes wrong. We cannot find ourselves in a position where we have no alternative but to accept a damaging Brexit that is wreaking havoc on our economy and our public services. So that's why a choice, not now, but at the right time, is important. I've said at the end of the process, and I've said that for a reason, because it is important that people have clarity about Brexit and what that means, and they then have clarity about the options. Now, I said autumn 2018 to spring 2019 for a reason, because that is when Theresa May is saying the Brexit process will end. So I've taken her at her word. If that changes, then I have, and I said this on the day I set out these plans, if that changes, then of course we will have to consider our timing in light of that, because the key point of principle for me is clarity at the end of a process to allow people to make a genuinely informed choice about the future of our country. Colin Mackay.
You talk about a win at this election reinforcing the case for another independence referendum. If you lose seats, does that weaken your case?
What? I was brought up... No. Journalists are here to do a job, and it's an important job to hold me and all of us to account. But can I say just... but can I say directly to that? I mean, maybe I'm old-fashioned, but the person who gets more vote, or the party rather, that gets more votes and more seats than any other party wins the election. That's democracy. But what I'm also saying very clearly, we're talking here about a choice for the end of the Brexit process, not for now. So this election also gives us more immediate opportunities. It gives us the opportunity to make sure that our voices in the House of Commons standing up for Scotland against Tory austerity. It makes sure that we will have SNP voices standing against an extreme Brexit, making sure that our interests are represented in these Brexit talks. So that's why I'm saying to people across Scotland, no matter how you voted in the referendum last year or the one 2 years ago, this is our opportunity to make Scotland's voice heard. And we know that the only way to make Scotland's voice heard is to vote SNP, and that is what I'm asking everyone to do on June the 8th. I think that's David Clegg from the Daily Record. I can see, yes.
Good eyesight.
It's actually very bad eyesight. That's why I wasn't sure.
I'm looking very handsome, I can assure you. First Minister, can I ask...
Diplomacy prevents me from commenting.
First Minister, the Conservatives are running this general election campaign in Scotland on one message, which is that they do not want another independence referendum.
Really?
There is some evidence that it is working and that some of your colleagues could lose their seats because of it. Do you worry about that, and that the decision to call a referendum may cost some of your colleagues their seats? And also, can I ask if the SNP would support the Labour proposals on income tax for 45% rate at £80,000 and a 50% rate at £123,000, and if not, why?
I set out our income tax proposals here. We will support a 50p tax rate for those earning £150,000 or more. We oppose tax cuts for those at the higher rate, and we have not delivered that tax cut in the Scottish Parliament, and we support a freeze on the basic rate of income tax because inflation is rising, and I don't think we should be passing the burden of austerity onto the shoulders of low and middle income earners. In terms of your... In terms of your next question, I'm very confident in all of my colleagues here, and for those watching at home, each and every one of them has been a strong voice for Scotland. Get out and vote for them on June the 8th to make sure they continue to be. Angus Robertson has been the voice of opposition, standing up to Theresa May and standing up to the Tories, not only putting her on the spot week in and week out, but putting Jeremy Corbyn to shame as he does it. So let's make sure that thorn in the side of the Tories is still there. And lastly, on the point of the Tory campaign, you may have heard me say this last week, but Ruth Davidson is going around Scotland saying I talk about nothing other than independence. The thing is, she talks about it so much that I don't get a chance to talk about it. What I'm talking about in this election is how we put an end to Tory austerity, how we get rid of policies like the rape clause. And Ruth Davidson's support for the rape clause really does shame her and show her in her true colours. And the reason the Tories want only to talk about independence, and if you look at any of their leaflets, there's no mention of health and education or welfare or any of the other policies that really matter to people. And the reason for that is this: they don't want to talk about their record, and they do not want to talk about their policies, because they know the Tory record and Tory policies harm our public services, harm people the length and breadth of this country. So I'll let Ruth Davidson continue to talk about whatever she wants in this campaign. I will continue to talk about how we put an end to the Tory policies that are doing so much damage to the people of our country. And next I'll take Kieran Andrews. A little birdie tells me it might be your birthday today, Kieran, but I may be misinformed.
No, that's correct.
Yeah,
21.
happy birthday.
Thank you.
We might have gone from one extreme to the other with the media. A happy medium is probably what we should try for.
No, that's fine. Just sing for everyone. It's okay. First Minister, you say in the manifesto you want to balance the budget by the end of Parliament, but there's a lot of extra spending here, no cuts and not very much in the way of tax rises. Do you have a detailed plan and a detailed plan of costings, and can you give us an idea of exactly how you plan to balance the budget?
What we have said in terms of our alternative fiscal plan, by balancing day-to-day spending by the end of the Parliament, reducing the deficit to its long-term pre-crash average and getting debt as a share of GDP on a downward trajectory. That will, compared to the Tory plans, free up £118 billion over the life of the Parliament. In addition to that, there are tax rises involved in this manifesto, the 45 to 50 pence on the additional rate of income tax, the removal of the marriage allowance, which discriminates between couples who are married and those who are not, and also reversing the cut in the bank levy. Those tax increases will raise an additional £10 billion over the life of the Parliament. The spending commitments in the manifesto add up to around £80 billion over the life of the Parliament, so they are affordable within that fiscal plan that we have set out. They also leave some headroom if, for example, there needs to be investment to deal with some of the impacts of Brexit. So this is a fully thought out and affordable plan. And how we balance the budget is to take sensible steps towards balancing that budget, but not doing it through aggressive cuts on the backs of those who can least afford them. So this is moderating, significantly moderating what the Tories are already planning, and it allows us to invest more in our NHS. It allows us to halt the welfare cuts that are driving more people into poverty, and it allows us to invest properly in our economy. Because one of the really stupid things about Tory economic policy over the past number of years has been that their own austerity has made it harder for them to meet their fiscal targets. So by investing, we can grow our economy faster and meet those targets more successfully than the Tories have managed. So this is common sense, and in this election we are the only party putting forward a credible alternative to austerity that gets the finances back onto a sustainable footing, but also means that we can have investment for the future, and I'm proud to put it forward today. I'll take Tom Gordon. I think is Tom Gordon. Oh, sorry, was I meant to be somebody else? I'll take Tom, and then I'll go behind to, I think that's Kathleen behind. Yeah.
Thanks, First Minister. The manifesto covers in 2015 and 16 were essentially single pictures of you. You are nowhere to be seen on this manifesto cover on the outside. Do you accept that you personally, I know you're on page 2, but you're not on the outside.
But there's a reason for that.
Do you accept that you personally have become a more divisive person on the doorstep for voters?
Well, I might let you boo that one. No. Look, do you know what? This is a great example. I don't mean this disrespectfully to Tom, because he's entitled to ask this question, but it's a great example of how, for all politicians, not just for SNP politicians, you're kind of damned if you do and damned if you don't. If you remember our manifesto launch last year, which involved everybody holding up big pictures of me, which was slightly uncomfortable, they all said it was the cult of the personality. This year, they're criticised. But the reason, Tom, is simple. That baby, that baby's much cuter than me. Come on. So that's why, the baby. But I am, in case you haven't noticed it, there is I'm not going to say lovely, because I don't think any pictures of me are particularly lovely, but there's one on page 2 holding up a Scotland love heart, which I think is a great image. OK, Kathleen.
Hello, Kathleen Nutt from The National. Theresa May has said... Thank you.
I'm not sure if that was for The National or Theresa May. I can't quite work it out.
Theresa May has said no to an independence referendum before Brexit is played out, and in fact Ruth Davidson has said that she doesn't want a second independence referendum for 35 years. So if Theresa May is returned to power, or whoever is in Downing Street, what can you do to make sure that Scotland can have a referendum before Brexit?
Look, I want Scotland to have a choice at the end of the Brexit process, and in that respect I often think there's not much difference really between what I'm saying and Theresa May is saying in that regard. I don't want people to have to choose now, that would be wrong. But at the end of the process, when we can judge what Brexit means for us and compare that to what being independent would mean, then people can make an informed choice. And the alternative to that is that we have to accept Brexit, no matter how damaging it might be. And as I said earlier on, we hear Theresa May today herself talk about the dangers of Brexit going wrong. She's spelling out the dangers to our economy, the dangers to our public services. Well, I don't believe that we should have to accept that come what may. I believe that our future should be decided for us. Not now, but when the time is right. The more immediate opportunity in this election is to make sure that we can influence those Brexit negotiations. So every vote for the SNP a week on Thursday is a vote to strengthen my hand to make sure that Scotland's voice is heard in these vital negotiations over the next few months. I've got a choice of Telegraph journalists now, which one to take. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Go on, Simon.
Thank you very much, First Minister. Can I just ask, Jeremy Corbyn said yesterday that he would open discussions with you over a second independence referendum if he becomes Prime Minister. So I wanted your thoughts on that. And secondly, I just wondered whether you felt you'd been a bit quick to write him off, given the polls seem to suggest that he's winning the campaign in England.
Well, I watched, I didn't watch all of it, but I watched some of the, I was going to say debate, but it wasn't a debate because they actually interact with each other. But, you know, I'm not sure it would have been hard to come off better than Theresa May in that Sky programme last night. Shame. And this is a serious point. You know, there are older people all over the country now wondering what a Tory government means for their care if they get older, and the house that they'll be able to leave to their children. There are older people wondering whether or not they will still have a winter fuel payment or whether their pensions are going to be safe in the future. And I think it is outrageous that the Tories are not answering any of these questions in the election. And I think anybody watching the Prime Minister last night would suddenly have seen very, very clearly why she has dodged any direct leaders' debates in this election. The polls, even though the polls are narrowing, I think everything suggests that we are still facing another Tory government. But it's a Tory government that has been exposed over this campaign, and that presents us here in Scotland with an opportunity. And that is an opportunity to make sure we keep a Tory government in check, that we don't face a Tory government without a strong Scottish voice standing up for our interests. And this is a really fundamentally important point in this election, because we know that Labour is no longer strong enough in Scotland to stand up to the Tories. So voting Labour in constituencies across Scotland would only run the risk of letting a Tory MP in the back door, and that is a risk people should think very carefully about. Only the SNP has the strength in Scotland to stand up to the Tories. So we face, I think, another Tory government, but it is a Tory government that has had its vulnerabilities exposed in this campaign. So let's make sure we grasp that opportunity to send strong Scottish voices to keep that government in check. Tory MPs, and we know this beyond a shadow of a doubt, we've only had to watch Ruth Davidson defend the rape clause, for goodness sake. We know that Tory MPs will just be a rubber stamp for anything Theresa May wants to do, whether that's more austerity cuts, more welfare cuts, an extreme Brexit that puts Scottish jobs on the line. So if we want strong Scottish voices standing up for Scotland, in Scotland that can only come from the SNP. So make sure on June the 8th you vote SNP to get those strong voices. Okay. Thank you all very much indeed. Before we end today, we will do, I'm sure, some more photographs here. Can I thank all of you for coming here today? But more importantly, can I ask each and every one of you now to leave this hall and get out there and campaign for your local SNP candidate. Before you leave Perth today, if you can, get out and campaign for Pete Wishart. And then campaign as hard as you can. There are big challenges ahead for all of us. The decisions taken by Westminster governments over these next few years will shape our country. Let's make sure SNP voices are in there standing up for Scotland. Let's get out, let's win this election.